The phone rang at 2 a.m. I knew who it was before I answered. Only one person would call after 7 years of silence with such perfect, cruel timing. Mom's voice cracked through the speaker like shattered glass. "Sarah? We need to talk about Marcus." My hand trembled against the cold phone screen. My medical textbooks scattered across my kitchen table where I'd been studying for tomorrow's surgical rotation. The coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago, but suddenly my mouth felt desert dry. "Now you want to talk?" My voice came out steadier than I felt, each word carved from 7 years of therapy and self-reconstruction. "After his own daughter had to speak up for you to believe me?" The silence on her end stretched so long I could hear her breathing, ragged and broken. Good, I thought, then immediately felt guilty for thinking it. But I was too tired to pretend anymore that their pain could compare to what they'd put me through. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 23, I was the daughter everyone called reliable, responsible, the one who never caused problems. While my friends were discovering themselves through late-night parties and spontaneous road trips, I was discovering how many double shifts a human body could handle before it started shutting down. The hospital where I worked as a nursing assistant became my second home. 12-hour shifts that started when the world was still dark and ended long after sunset. My scrubs had permanent coffee stains that no amount of washing could remove, and my feet knew every crack in the linoleum floors of the cardiac ward. I'd catch my reflection in patient room windows sometimes and barely recognize the exhausted girl staring back, dark circles under brown eyes that used to sparkle. Auburn hair pulled back in the same messy bun for 3 days straight. My apartment was a converted garage behind my parents' house, 600 square feet that I'd painted sage green because some magazine said it was calming. The space was mine, but never really felt like it. Close enough that I could hear Dad's morning cough through my thin walls, far enough that I could pretend I had independence. Every surface was covered in medical textbooks, practice MCAT guides, and color-coded notes that mapped out my 5-year plan. Ace the MCAT, get into medical school, become an emergency physician, save lives, make my parents proud. The last part seemed so important then. I kept a photo of us on my desk. Mom, Dad, Marcus, and me at my college graduation. Marcus had his arm around my shoulders, his realtor's smile perfectly practiced even then. We looked like the American dream. We looked like a family that loved each other. I was the daughter who meal prepped on Sundays, dividing chicken and rice into perfectly portioned containers, always making extra for my parents. I monitored Dad's blood sugar levels, organized his medications into daily pill boxes, and drove him to his endocrinologist appointments. When Mom's arthritis flared up, I'd massage her hands with the expensive cream I couldn't really afford but bought anyway. At family gatherings, I was the one who helped in the kitchen, who remembered birthdays, who mediated when Dad and Marcus argued about politics. I was the glue, the peacekeeper, the one who fixed things. Marcus was 4 years older, successful, married to beautiful Jennifer, who had the kind of laugh that made everyone else start laughing too. Their daughter Emma was 6 then, all wild curls and gap-toothed grins, who called me Aunt Sassy because Sarah was too hard to pronounce, and somehow the nickname stuck. Marcus had been my protector once, the brother who'd threatened to beat up Tommy Rollins when he'd made fun of my braces in 6th grade. He'd taught me to drive in his beat-up Honda Civic, patient through all my jerky starts and sudden stops. When I'd cried over my first heartbreak, he'd brought me ice cream and told me I deserved better. That Marcus felt like a lifetime ago. That Marcus might have been a lie all along. I still don't know which possibility hurts more. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were sacred, untouchable, the one constant in a world that spun too fast for any of us to keep up with. The ritual began at 4 o'clock sharp, and I'd arrive at 3:30 to help Mom with the cooking, even though she'd insist she didn't need help while simultaneously handing me a peeler and pointing at the potatoes. The kitchen would be alive with steam from simmering pots, the oven window fogged from the roast that had been cooking low and slow since morning. Mom moved through her kitchen like a conductor directing a symphony, every movement practiced and perfect after 35 years of marriage. She'd tell the same stories while we cooked. How Dad had burned water the first time he tried to make her dinner. How Marcus had eaten an entire chocolate cake meant for a church bake sale when he was 8. How I'd tried to bandage the Thanksgiving turkey when I was 5 because I thought it was hurt. The dining room was a time capsule that never changed. The mahogany table Dad had inherited from his parents, covered with Mom's white lace tablecloth that only came out on Sundays and holidays. The good china, wedding gifts that had survived 3 moves and 2 toddlers, gleamed under the brass chandelier that Dad insisted wasn't outdated, just classic. He'd have his jazz vinyl playing softly in the background, Miles Davis or John Coltrane depending on his mood, the record player crackling in that warm way that made everything feel softer, safer. The smell would hit you as soon as you walked in. Pot roast so tender it fell apart when you looked at it. Green beans with almonds, mashed potatoes whipped with too much butter and just enough cream, and Mom's famous dinner rolls that Marcus and I used to fight over the last one until she started making double batches just to keep the peace. Marcus would arrive at 4:15, always fashionably late, but never enough to actually upset anyone, with Jennifer and Emma in tow. Emma would burst through the door like a tiny hurricane, running straight for me with her arms outstretched, shouting, "Aunt Sassy!" at a volume that could wake the dead. I'd scoop her up and spin her around while she giggled, her dress flying out like a flower blooming. Jennifer would apologize for being late, blame traffic that we all knew didn't exist on Sunday afternoons, while Marcus carried in the wine they'd brought. Always red. Always the same brand Dad pretended to like, but secretly replaced with his beer the moment Marcus wasn't looking. The conversations flowed as predictably as the seasons. Dad would ask Marcus about the real estate market, and Marcus would launch into his practiced speech about interest rates and property values, throwing in just enough success stories to remind everyone he was the family's golden child without being too obvious about it. Mom would ask Jennifer about her book club, and Jennifer would describe whatever literary fiction they were pretending to have read, while actually just drinking wine and gossiping about neighborhood drama. I'd help Emma with her coloring books at the table, teaching her to stay inside the lines while she informed me that princesses didn't have to follow rules, and I'd tell her she was absolutely right. After dinner, while the women cleaned up, a division of labor I'd stopped fighting years ago, the men would retreat to the living room to watch whatever game was on, their voices rising and falling with the score. Emma would help dry the dishes, standing on the step stool I'd bought specifically for her, handling each plate like it was made of spun glass. Then we'd all gather in the living room for board games, usually Scrabble, where Dad would try to cheat with made-up words, and Mom would call him on it every single time. Emma would fall asleep around 8, curled up on the couch with her head in my lap, and I'd carry her to the guest room that still had the glow in the dark stars I'd helped Mom put up when Marcus was little, tucking her in with the stuffed rabbit I'd given her for her 5th birthday. The one she'd named Mr. Hoppy because she was 5, and that was the best name in the world. These Sundays felt like everything I was working toward. The reason for the double shifts, the studying until my eyes burned, the exhaustion that lived in my bones. This was what family meant. This was what love looked like. This was before I learned that sometimes love is just a costume that monsters wear, and Sunday dinners can become crime scenes where no one believes the victim. It started at Emma's 7th birthday party, a Saturday afternoon in late March, when the Iowa weather couldn't decide between winter and spring. The backyard was transformed into what Emma called Unicorn Princess Land, Streamers in every shade of pink and purple, a bounce house that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and a cake so elaborate it needed its own table. Jennifer had outdone herself, orchestrating the party with the precision of a military operation while somehow making it look effortless. 20-some kids ran wild through the yard, their squeals piercing enough to send the neighbors' dogs into barking fits. Parents clustered in small groups, holding plastic cups of lemonade or the adult punch Jennifer kept refilling with a knowing wink. Marcus had been drinking since noon, nothing dramatic, just a steady flow of beers that left him looser than usual, his laugh a little too loud, his movements a little too careless. I noticed because I'd been watching him more carefully lately, though I couldn't have told you why. Maybe it was the way he'd started hugging me hello, pulling me in tighter and longer than felt brotherly. Maybe it was how his compliments had shifted from, "You look tired, kiddo," to, "You look really good today, Sarah." Small things that felt like shadows in my peripheral vision, there but gone when I turned to look directly. I went inside to get more ice from the freezer in the garage, grateful for the quiet and the cool air after hours of supervising sugar-hyped children. The kitchen was empty, everyone outside watching Emma unwrap her mountain of presents. I was wrestling with the ice maker. The thing had been broken for years, but Dad refused to fix it or admit defeat. When I heard the sliding door open and close behind me, Marcus's reflection appeared in the stainless steel refrigerator door. Distorted, but unmistakable. "Need help with that?" His voice was closer than it should have been. I could smell the beer on his breath, mixing with his cologne, the expensive stuff Jennifer bought him for Christmas that he wore too much of. "I've got it," I said, keeping my voice light, normal, sisterly. "This thing just needs the right touch." I jimmied the ice maker handle the way Dad had shown me, but my hands weren't cooperating, suddenly clumsy under Marcus's gaze. "You look really good today," he said, and there it was again, that tone that made my stomach clench. "That dress is nice on you." I was wearing a sundress I'd bought at Target, nothing special, certainly nothing worth commenting on. He moved closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body in the cool kitchen. "Here, let me." He reached around me, his chest pressing against my back, his hand covering mine on the ice maker handle. His other hand found my waist, fingers spreading across my hip in a way that sent alarm bells screaming through my entire body. "The ice maker's stuck again," I said loudly, too loudly, hoping someone would hear and come investigate. I ducked under his arm, clutching the ice bucket like a shield between us. "Got it. Thanks anyway." The ice maker chose that moment to cooperate, chunks of ice clattering into the bucket with a violence that matched my heartbeat. He stood there for a moment, something flickering across his face. Frustration? Disappointment? Before his usual smile slid back into place. "Better get back out there," he said, casual as anything. "Emma's about to do the piñata." He brushed past me on his way out, his hand grazing my lower back, fingers dragging across the fabric of my dress for just a second too long. I stood in the kitchen, holding the ice bucket, my hands shaking so hard the ice rattled like bones. Through the window, I watched him return to the party, scooping Emma up onto his shoulders while she shrieked with delight. Jennifer smiled at him. Perfect family, perfect father, perfect brother. I counted to 60 before I followed, plastering on a smile that felt like broken glass in my mouth. The rest of the party passed in a blur. I stayed on the opposite side of the yard from Marcus, using Emma and the other kids as human shields. That night, I lay awake replaying every second, every word, every touch, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood, misconstrued, misremembered. But my body remembered the truth, even when my mind tried to rewrite it. My skin still crawled where he'd touched me. I became an expert at rationalization, A master class in self-gaslighting. Every strange interaction with Marcus got filed away in a mental folder labeled "You're overreacting" that grew thicker by the day. When he started texting me at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., "You up? Thinking about you," or "Can't sleep? Wanna talk?" I told myself he was having trouble at work. Real estate was stressful. The market was volatile. He needed his little sister's support, that's all. I'd respond hours later with safe, bland messages. "Sorry, was asleep. Hope you're okay." I never asked what he was thinking about or why I was on his mind when his wife was lying next to him in bed. He began showing up at my apartment unannounced, always with an excuse that sounded reasonable if you didn't look too close. The bathroom faucet he insisted was leaking. It wasn't. The smoke detector he swore he heard beeping when he walked by. Impossible through the walls. The car maintenance he claimed I needed help with, even though I'd been changing my own oil since I was 16 and he knew it. Each time, I'd let him in, because what else do you do when your brother shows up to help? Jennifer thought he was being a good brother. Mom praised him for looking after me. "It's so nice that you two are close," she'd say, and I'd smile and nod while my skin tried to crawl off my body. The excuses I made for him could have filled a textbook on denial. When he'd stand too close while fixing things, I blamed the small space of my apartment. When his hugs lasted 15 seconds, instead of 3, I told myself some families were just more affectionate. When he'd comment on my appearance, "Those scrubs don't do you justice," or "You're too pretty to be single," I convinced myself he was trying to boost my confidence like a good big brother should. The mental gymnastics were exhausting, but somehow less terrifying than the alternative explanation. I started scheduling my life around avoiding him without admitting that's what I was doing. Sunday dinners became minefields I navigated with military precision. I'd arrive exactly at 4, never early, ensuring Mom needed me in the kitchen immediately. I'd volunteer for dish duty, grocery runs, anything that kept me moving, never stationary long enough for Marcus to corner me. When he'd offer to walk me to my apartment after dinner, 50 feet across the backyard, I'd say I needed to help Mom with something else first, wait until he left, then sneak home in the dark like a thief. My parents started noticing my absences. "You missed 3 Sundays in a row," Mom said one night, concern creasing her forehead. "Are you okay? You seem distant lately." How could I explain that distant was the only way I felt safe, that their son, their successful, married, father of the year son, made my skin crawl? I couldn't, so I blamed work, school, exhaustion, all true enough to avoid the real truth. "The MCAT is brutal," I'd say. "I'm pulling doubles to save for application fees." They'd nod, understanding, proud of their hard-working daughter, never suspecting she was working hard to avoid being alone with their son. The worst part was how guilty I felt for suspecting him. This was Marcus, the brother who'd taught me to ride a bike, running beside me until I could balance on my own, who'd threatened to fight my prom date if he didn't treat me right, who'd driven 3 hours when I called him crying after failing my first college exam. That history weighed on me like a physical thing, pressing down on my suspicions until I could barely breathe. I'd look at family photos and search for signs I'd missed. Evidence that this had always been there, but all I saw was my big brother. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe the stress was getting to me. Maybe I was so lonely and tired that I was misinterpreting normal sibling affection as something sinister. The word maybe became my favorite lie, a soft place to land instead of facing the sharp edges of truth. 3 months after Emma's birthday party, on a Thursday afternoon that felt like any other until it wasn't, Marcus called me at work. "Hey, can you do me a huge favor? I left my phone in my car and I'm in a showing. Can you grab it? Jennifer's calling about Emma's school pickup." His voice was rushed, professional, the voice he used with clients. I was on my lunch break, sitting in the hospital cafeteria picking at a sad salad I'd bought from the vending machine. His car was in the visitor lot, he said. He'd left it, unlocked by accident. The phone was in the center console. Please, Sarah, I'll owe you one. I found his black BMW exactly where he said it would be, unlocked just as promised. The phone sat in the console, face up, like bait in a trap I didn't know I was walking into. I grabbed it, planning to leave it at the reception desk, when it buzzed with a text notification. The preview showed on the screen before I could look away. Can't wait to see you tonight. Jennifer thinks I'm at Brad's poker game. My stomach dropped, that familiar feeling of the world tilting off its axis. Another text came through immediately after, from a contact saved simply as S, with a photo. My photo, pulled from my Facebook profile, the one from last year's hospital Christmas party where I'd actually felt pretty for once. The message under my picture read, "Miss your hands on me." My legs gave out. I sat down hard in his driver's seat, the leather hot from the sun, burning through my scrubs. My hands shook as I touched the screen. I knew his passcode, Emma's birthday, he'd never changed it, and opened the message thread. What I found was worse than an affair. It was a fantasy. Dozens of messages between Marcus and this fake version of me, responses he'd crafted to things I'd never said, conversations we'd never had. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about what you did. Jennifer could never understand what we have. Each message time-stamped during times I'd been at work, asleep, studying. He'd been having an affair with an imaginary version of me, both sides of the conversation constructed in his mind. But it got worse. As I scrolled up with trembling fingers, I found photos. Pictures of me I didn't know existed. Me sleeping on my parents' couch last Christmas, mouth slightly open, vulnerable. Me bending over to pick up Emma's toys, taken from an angle that made me want to throw up. Me in my apartment through my kitchen window, cooking dinner in shorts and a tank top, unaware I was being watched. The most recent was from 2 days ago. Me walking to my car after a night shift, exhausted, guard down, taken from somewhere in the parking garage. I screenshot everything, my fingers moving on autopilot while my mind went blank with horror. 23 screenshots. I emailed them to myself, then to a new email account I created right there in his car, then saved them to my cloud drive. Some part of me, the part that had been preparing for medical school, that understood the importance of evidence and documentation, took over while the rest of me shattered. I found more in his photo album, hidden in a folder marked Property Listings 2019. Videos. Short clips of me at family dinners, zoomed in on my chest, my legs. Audio recordings of our conversations, innocent talks about work and school, that he'd saved like love letters. The phone rang in my hand, Marcus calling from the showing, probably wondering where I was. I didn't answer. I set the phone on his seat, got out of the car, and ran to the hospital bathroom where I threw up until there was nothing left but bile and the taste of betrayal. I sat on the cold tile floor. Those images burned into my retinas, those fake conversations playing on loop in my head. My own brother had turned me into his personal pornography, had created an entire relationship that existed only in his sick imagination. And he'd been documenting it, collecting me like evidence of something I'd never done, would never do, could never even imagine. The word brother tasted like poison in my mouth. I called in sick for the rest of my shift, went home, and checked every inch of my apartment for cameras until my fingers bled from pulling at vents and fixtures. I found nothing, but I'd never feel safe there again. I waited until the next Sunday dinner. For 3 days, I'd practiced what I would say in the mirror, my phone heavy in my pocket with its terrible evidence. I'd barely slept, barely eaten, jumping at every sound, checking my locks obsessively. But Sunday came anyway. inevitable as a cancer diagnosis, and I knew I couldn't carry this alone anymore. My family deserved the truth. Emma deserved protection. I deserved to be believed. I arrived at 4 exactly, my hands steady only because I'd taken beta blockers from the hospital supply room, the ones we gave patients before surgery to control their heart rate. Mom hugged me at the door, commenting that I looked pale. "Just tired," I said, the last lie I'd tell for Marcus. Dinner progressed normally. The pot roast tender as always. Dad's jazz playing softly. Emma chattering about her new teacher. I pushed food around my plate, waiting. Marcus sat across from me, relaxed, laughing at Dad's terrible jokes, helping Emma cut her meat. The perfect father. The perfect son. After dessert, Mom's apple pie that tasted like sawdust in my mouth, I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, too loud in the sudden silence I'd created. "I need to show you all something." My voice came out steady, clinical, the voice I used when delivering bad news to patients' families. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots, and handed it to Mom first. Her face went from confused to shocked to white in the span of seconds. "What is this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Dad grabbed the phone, his jaw tightening as he scrolled. The muscle in his cheek jumped the way it did when he was trying to control his temper. Jennifer leaned over, gasped, covered her mouth with both hands. The phone made its way around the table like evidence at a trial, which I suppose it was. Marcus watched its progress with an expression I'd never seen before, calculating, cold, already formulating his defense. "Those are fake." His voice was calm, amused even. He actually laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Sarah's obviously gotten good with Photoshop. This is..." He shook, his head playing bewildered perfectly. "This is sick. Sarah, why would you make something like this?" "I have your phone," I said, pulling it from my bag. I'd gone back to his car that night, couldn't stop myself. "The real messages are here. The photos you took of me, the videos." I opened his photo app, showed them the hidden folder. Jennifer stood up so fast her chair fell backward, the crash making Emma jump in the living room where she was watching cartoons, thank God. "You're sick," Jennifer hissed at Marcus, but then she turned to me, and her eyes were cold. "Or you both are. I don't know what game this is." "It's not a game." My voice cracked. "Look at the timestamps. Look at the metadata on the photos. I was at work when these messages were sent. I can prove it. I have my time cards. The hospital security footage will show..." "Sarah." Mom's voice was quiet, deadly quiet. "Marcus would never. This is... You've been so stressed lately. The studying, the double shifts. Maybe you're confused." "Confused?" The word came out as a shriek. "He has pictures of me sleeping. He's been stalking me. He created a fake relationship with me." Marcus leaned back in his chair, concern painted across his face like a mask. "She's been acting strange for months, missing dinners, avoiding everyone. I mentioned to Mom and Dad that I was worried about her mental health." He turned to our parents, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "Remember when I told you she seemed paranoid? That she was isolating herself? This is what I was afraid of." Dad wouldn't look at me. He stared at the table, his hands clenched into fists. "Sarah, maybe you should talk to someone, a professional." "Are you serious?" My voice broke completely. "I'm showing you evidence and you think I need therapy?" "Evidence can be faked," Marcus said smoothly. "But mental illness, that's harder to fake. Sarah, we want to help you. This fantasy you've created..." "Fantasy?" I laughed, harsh and bitter. "The only one with fantasies here is you." Jennifer was gathering Emma's things, her movements sharp and angry. "We're leaving. I don't know what's going on here, but I won't have Emma exposed to this." She looked at me with something worse than anger, disgust mixed with pity. Stay away from our family, Sarah. Get help. The room exploded into chaos then, everyone talking over each other. But through it all, I saw Marcus's face. He was watching me, and for just a moment, his mask slipped. He smiled. A small, victorious smile that told me everything. He'd won. He'd prepared for this, laid groundwork I hadn't seen, painted me as unstable before I could paint him as predatory. The golden child had spoken, and I was just the crazy, overworked daughter who'd snapped under pressure. The next week revealed Marcus's manipulation like layers of rotting wallpaper being peeled back, each one revealing something worse. Underneath. It started when Dad called me Tuesday morning, his voice formal, distant, like I was a stranger who'd disappointed him. "Your brother mentioned the money," he said, without preamble. $5,000, Sarah? If you needed help, you should have asked us, not stolen from him. What money? My voice came out strangled. I was sitting in my car outside the hospital about to start my shift, and suddenly the world tilted sideways. Dad, I've never borrowed money from Marcus. Never. He has the withdrawal slips, your signature. Dad's voice was tired, so tired. Sarah, this has to stop. First the accusations, now theft. Your mother is beside herself. I missed my shift. Instead, I drove to the bank, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The manager pulled up the family emergency account records, the one Marcus managed because he was good with finances, and I was too busy with school. 5 withdrawals over 3 months. Each one coinciding with my double shifts, times I couldn't possibly have been at the bank. But the signatures look like mine. He'd been practicing, I realized with sick clarity. All those times he'd borrowed my notes from anatomy class, claimed he was interested in medical terms. He'd been learning to forge my handwriting. "Can you pull security footage?" I begged the manager. She looked at me with sympathy but shook her head. "Only with a police report or court order. Is there a problem with the account?" The problem was bigger than the account. When I got home, I found Amy, Jennifer's sister, waiting by my apartment. She looked nervous, glancing around like Marcus might appear from the shadows. "I need to tell you something," she said, "but you can't say it came from me." We sat in my car, doors locked, engine running. Amy pulled out her phone, showed me text messages from Marcus dating back 2 years. Nothing sexual, but invasive, prodding. Questions about me disguised as brotherly concern. "Does Sarah date? Has she mentioned anyone special? I worry about her being alone so much." Then more recently, "I think Sarah might be having mental health issues. Has Jennifer mentioned anything?" "He's been building this narrative for years," Amy said. "Jennifer told me he's been documenting your episodes. Times you seemed paranoid, withdrawn. He's been telling your parents you've been acting erratic. Last month, he told them he caught you talking to yourself in your apartment." "I was practicing a presentation," I whispered, "for my MCAT prep class." Amy nodded grimly. "He also mentioned to Jennifer that you might be using stimulants. For studying," he said. "But still, he's been planting seeds that you're unstable, possibly addicted to something. Paranoid." "Sarah." She hesitated, then pulled out another phone, a burner. "This is Jennifer's old phone. She thought she lost it, but I found it in Marcus's home office when I was babysitting. Look at the search. History." The searches made my blood run cold. How to recognize mental illness in siblings. Signs of stimulant abuse. What to do when family member makes false accusations. Personality disorders and false memories. All dated months before Emma's birthday party, before any of this started, or before I noticed it had started. "There's more," Amy said quietly. "He's been accessing your medical records. Jennifer's friend works at your hospital. She mentioned Marcus had called asking about your work schedule, said there was a family emergency. She gave him your schedule for the past 6 months. He knows exactly when you're working, when you're home, when you're alone. Why? The word came out broken. Why would he do this? Amy looked at me with pity. I found journals in his office, not hidden, just in his desk. Pages and pages about you, dating back to when you turned 18. He's been obsessed with you for 5 years, Sarah. The perfect sister he could never have. He wrote about waiting until you were ready, until you could understand what you meant to him. When you didn't respond to his subtle advances, he started creating the relationship he wanted. And when that wasn't enough, she gestured helplessly at the phones between us. He created a backup plan, I finished. Made me crazy so no one would believe me when I found out. He's done this before, Amy said quietly. Jennifer's cousin mentioned something once, years ago. A woman at his first real estate firm who accused him of stalking. She ended up having a nervous breakdown, left town. Everyone said she was unstable. Sound familiar? I stared at the evidence of my brother's careful, methodical destruction of my credibility. 5 years. He'd been planning this for 5 years. Every family dinner, every hug, every moment I'd thought we were just siblings had been something else to him. Something sick and patient and calculating. The Marcus I'd grown up with, the brother I'd loved, had either never existed or had died somewhere along the way, replaced by this stranger who wore his face and used his voice but was capable of a cruelty I couldn't comprehend. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that kitchen moment differently. What if Emma hadn't been outside? What if no one had been home? What if he'd been planning something worse and I'd interrupted it? The what-ifs ate at me like acid, dissolving my sanity one drop at a time. I'd lie in my bed, staring at the ceiling, watching car headlights trace patterns through my blinds, and wonder how many times he'd stood outside my window in the dark. How many nights had I slept peacefully while my own brother watched me through the glass? I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Then again, the next day. And the next. My supervisor, Nancy, who'd been like a second mother to me, showed up at my apartment on day 4. She took one look at me, unwashed hair, the same scrubs I'd been wearing for 3 days, eyes swollen from crying, and pulled me into a hug that broke something inside me. I sobbed into her shoulder, great, heaving sobs that felt like they were ripping me apart from the inside, but I couldn't tell her why. How do you explain that your brother has turned you into his personal fantasy? That your parents chose him over you? That everything you thought you knew about love and family was a lie? After Nancy left, promising to hold my shifts for 1 more week, I tore my apartment apart. I found the first camera in the bathroom vent so small I almost missed it. The size of a button, black against black metal, the tiny red recording light invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I destroyed it with a hammer, each strike accompanied by a scream I didn't know I was capable of making. The sound brought my landlord running, but I couldn't explain. I just stood there, hammer in hand, camera pieces scattered like dead insects on my bathroom floor, crying so hard I couldn't speak. The search became obsessive. I removed every vent cover, unscrewed every light fixture, checked behind every outlet. I found 2 more cameras, one in my bedroom smoke detector, one in the kitchen clock he'd given me last Christmas. "So you won't be late," he'd said, with that smile everyone trusted. How long had they been there? How many hours of footage did he have? Me changing, showering, existing in what I thought was privacy. I burned the clock in the sink, watching the plastic melt and bubble, the smoke alarm shrieking until I ripped it from the ceiling and threw it in the dumpster. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like ash and stuck in my throat. I lost 8 pounds in a week. my scrubs hanging loose on my frame. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I didn't recognize the hollow-eyed ghost staring back. This is what he wanted, I thought. To break me. To make me into the crazy person he'd been telling everyone I was. The irony was perfect. By traumatizing me into this state, he'd created the very evidence he needed to prove I was unstable. Jennifer had texted once, "I don't know what game you're playing, but stay away from my family." My family. As if I hadn't been there when Emma was born, hadn't held Jennifer's hand during her emergency C-section when Marcus was stuck in traffic. Drunk at a bar, I later learned. As if I hadn't been Emma's aunt for 7 years, hadn't made her Halloween costumes and read her bedtime stories, and taught her that girls could be doctors too. That text broke something different in me, something I didn't know could break. The loss of Emma felt like a death, but worse, because she was still out there, probably asking where Aunt Sassy went, and someone was telling her lies about why I disappeared. Mom left voicemails that I couldn't finish listening to. "Sweetheart, Marcus is willing to forgive you. We can get you help. Dr. Morrison is wonderful. He specializes in these kinds of delusions. Please, Sarah, come home. Let us help you." Help! Like I was the sick one. Like I was the one who'd violated sacred boundaries. Like I was the predator instead of the prey. I threw my phone against the wall, watched it shatter, then immediately panicked because what if I needed evidence later? I spent an hour on my hands and knees, picking up pieces, cutting my fingers on broken glass, my blood mixing with tears on my dirty floor. The friendship bracelet Marcus had made me when I was 7 sat in my jewelry box. Red and blue thread, our favorite colors then, woven together in a pattern he'd spent weeks perfecting. "Sisters are forever," he'd said, not knowing the right word, and I'd worn it until the threads went gray with age. I held it now, remembering the boy who'd walked me to school, who'd shared his lunch money when I forgot mine, who'd let me sleep in his bed during thunderstorms. That boy was dead, if he'd ever existed at all. I burned the bracelet in the sink with everything else, watching 20 years of lies curl into smoke and ash. The turning point came through an unexpected source. Jennifer's sister Amy called me 2 weeks into my self-imposed exile, her voice urgent and low like she was afraid of being overheard. "Sarah, don't hang up. Please. I believe you." Those 3 words hit me like electricity, jolting something dead back to life inside my chest. I sat on my kitchen floor, phone pressed to my ear, barely breathing as she continued. "I've been watching Marcus for months. The way he talks about you, it's not normal. And Jennifer? She knows something's off but won't admit it." Amy had done her own investigation, she explained. She'd noticed Marcus's possessiveness disguised as brotherly concern, how he'd installed tracking apps on Jennifer's phone for safety, how he always knew where everyone was, always had an explanation that sounded reasonable until you lined them all up and saw the pattern. "He's been monitoring Jennifer's emails," Amy said, reading her texts. "She thinks she's going crazy, forgetting conversations, losing things. But it's him. He's gaslighting her too, just differently." "There's more," Amy continued, her voice dropping even lower. "The poker games he goes to? I followed him once. There's no poker game, Sarah. He sits in his car outside your apartment. For hours. I have photos." She paused, then said the words that changed everything. "I'm worried about Emma. The way he controls her, tells her secrets from Mommy, makes her promise not to tell. It's grooming behavior, Sarah. You know it is." Emma. Sweet, innocent Emma who deserved better than growing up in a house built on lies and control. That night, something shifted inside me. The broken, sobbing girl who'd been hiding in her apartment died, and in her place rose someone harder, focused, furious. I looked around my destroyed apartment, the holes where I'd ripped out cameras, the burned remains in the sink, the shattered phone screen, and saw it differently. This wasn't evidence of my breakdown. It was evidence of his crimes. I pulled out my laptop and started writing everything down. Every incident, every date, every witness who might have seen something without realizing it. The timeline spread across pages, 5 years of subtle escalation I'd been too trusting to see. I called my supervisor Nancy, told her I'd be back to work on Monday. "I need one thing," I said. "Can you get me copies of my time cards for the last 6 months?" She didn't ask why, just said yes. I made an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in family cases, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been recommended by a coworker who'd escaped an abusive marriage. I walked into her office with a binder of evidence, organized and tabbed like the medical charts I maintained at work. She listened for 2 hours, taking notes, her face growing increasingly grim. "This is criminal," she said finally. "Stalking, harassment, voyeurism. But proving it will be hard. He's established you as unreliable." "Then I need to be unimpeachable," I said. "What do I do?" She laid out a plan. Document everything going forward. Install my own security cameras. Keep attending family dinners. Act normal. Don't give him ammunition. Get the bank records legally. File a police report to create a paper trail, even if they don't investigate immediately. Build a case so airtight that when the truth came out, no one could deny it. "It'll be hard," she warned. "You'll have to face him, pretend everything's fine while gathering evidence. Can you do that?" I thought about Emma, about other women Marcus might target, about the girl I'd been before this, who'd believed in family and trust and love. She deserved justice. They all did. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." I went to the bank that afternoon and opened a new account at a different branch, moving what little savings I had left. I bought security cameras with cash, small ones that would record to the cloud. I changed my locks, adding a deadbolt and chain. I got a new phone with a new number, giving it only to Nancy and Patricia. I filed a police report, knowing they'd do nothing but needing that paper trail. The officer taking my statement looked bored until I showed him the photos of the cameras I'd found. His demeanor shifted slightly. "We'll keep this on file," he said, which we both knew meant nothing would happen. But it was documented. Official. That night, I sat in my newly secured apartment and wrote a letter to my future self. "Remember this feeling, this clarity, this rage. Use it. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're a survivor gathering her weapons. He thinks he won. He's wrong." My plan wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, laid out with the methodical precision I'd learned from years of medical training. I hired a private investigator with the last of my savings, a former cop named David Chen, who came recommended by Patricia. I handed him Marcus's patterns, the supposed poker games every Thursday, the late-night property showings, the weekend golf trips. "Find out where he really goes," I said, "and who he's with." David nodded, no judgment in his eyes, just professional assessment. "Give me 3 weeks." Those 3 weeks, I played the repentant daughter seeking forgiveness. I returned to Sunday dinners, arriving with flowers for Mom, Dad's favorite beer, coloring books for Emma. "I've been seeing someone," I told them over pot roast, letting my voice carry just enough shame. "Dr. Morrison, you were right. The stress was getting to me." Mom cried with relief, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. Dad patted my shoulder awkwardly. Marcus watched me with satisfaction, thinking he'd won, not noticing the tiny camera I'd planted in the dining room centerpiece, disguised as a decorative button. David's first report came after 10 days. Marcus at a Marriott downtown during his Thursday poker game. Different women on different nights. None of them the fantasy version of me he'd created, but all young, all dark-haired, all small, like me. The photos were clear, timestamp embedded, his car's license plate visible. The second report was worse. Marcus had been visiting other properties during his supposed showings, vacant homes where he had the lockbox codes. Security footage from a nearby ATM caught him entering one with a woman who looked barely legal. She left crying. I contacted the bank with Patricia's help, filing a formal fraud investigation with a court order for the security footage. The truth was damning. Marcus's assistant, a young woman named Brittany, had made the withdrawals. When questioned by the bank's investigator, she broke down immediately. Mr. Mitchell said his sister needed the money but was too proud to ask. He said she'd asked him to handle it discreetly. I thought I was helping. Her sworn statement went into my growing file. The bathroom cameras led to a deeper search. I gave David the serial numbers, and he traced them to Marcus's credit card. 4 purchases over 2 years, different brands, all small enough to hide easily. But Marcus had made one mistake. He'd bought them online, shipped to his office. The receipts existed. The trail was clear. How many other cameras were out there? How many other women had he watched without their knowledge? I created 3 copies of everything. One lived in Patricia's office safe. One in a safety deposit box at a bank Marcus didn't know about. One uploaded to a cloud server under an email address no one could trace to me. The file grew daily. David's surveillance photos, Brittany's statement, the camera receipts, the bank footage showing the truth about the withdrawals. I added the recordings from my hidden cameras at family dinners, Marcus's casual lies about my treatment, my parents' eager acceptance of his narrative. But I needed more. I needed something undeniable, something that would shatter his golden boy image beyond repair. Amy became my unexpected ally, feeding me information from inside. Marcus had been getting sloppy at home, leaving his laptop open, his phone unlocked. Jennifer was pulling away, spending more time at her mother's house with Emma. The perfect family was cracking. He's planning something for the reunion, Amy warned me one night. He told Jennifer you might act out because of your condition, that the family needed to be prepared for a scene. Dad's 60th birthday reunion was in 2 weeks. 50 relatives would gather to celebrate. The whole extended family Marcus performed for so perfectly. He was expecting me to explode, to validate every lie he'd told about my instability. Instead, I would give him exactly what he didn't expect: calm, calculated exposure. I met with David one last time, outlining what I needed. Can you get into his cloud storage? I asked. I want to know what else he's hiding. David smiled grimly. Already did. You're going to want to sit down for this. The files he showed me were beyond what I'd imagined. Marcus didn't just have videos of me. He had folders labeled with other women's names, clients, Jennifer's friends, strangers from the gym. Hundreds of hours of footage, some clearly taken without consent in changing rooms, bathrooms, private moments. He'd been doing this for years, long before his obsession with me reached its peak. I wasn't special. I was just the one he couldn't have, the one who'd become his favorite fixation. This is criminal, David said quietly. This goes to the FBI. After the reunion, I said, I need my family to see who he really is first. They need to see it in a way they can't deny or explain away. The day of Dad's 60th birthday reunion arrived with the kind of perfect weather that felt like cosmic irony. Clear blue skies, gentle breeze, the September sun warm, but not oppressive. I stood in front of my mirror that morning, applying makeup to cover the dark circles that had become permanent residents under my eyes, and practiced my smile until it looked believable. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the girl who'd sobbed on her bathroom floor weeks ago. This woman had steel in her spine and evidence in her pocket. The family had rented the church fellowship hall, the same one where Marcus got married. where I'd given a toast about gaining a sister in Jennifer, where Emma had been baptized. 50 relatives were driving in from 3 states. Aunts and uncles who still sent me birthday cards with $20 bills. Cousins I'd grown up swimming with at the lake every summer. Dad's brother Tom, who'd taught me to fish. They all thought they were coming to celebrate Dad's milestone birthday. They had no idea they'd be witnesses to something else entirely. I arrived at noon to help set up, wearing the blue dress Mom had bought me for Easter 3 years ago. Conservative, familial, the picture of a dutiful daughter. I hung streamers, arranged centerpieces, set out the photo boards Mom had made chronicling Dad's 6 decades. There was Marcus and me at 5 and 9, covered in mud from the creek behind our house, grinning like we'd discovered treasure. Looking at that photo felt like staring at ghosts of children who'd died somewhere along the way. Marcus showed up at 2 with Jennifer and Emma, playing the perfect son, carrying in the cake he'd special ordered from the expensive bakery downtown. 3 tiers, chocolate with raspberry filling, Happy 60th Dad, written in gold frosting. He hugged Mom, shook hands with arriving relatives, charmed everyone with stories about his latest real estate conquests. He'd been drinking already. I could smell whiskey under his cologne when he passed me in the kitchen. "Glad you're feeling better, sis," he said, loudly enough for our Aunt Carol to hear. "We were all so worried about you." By 4 o'clock the hall was packed. The buffet table groaned under Mom's cooking and various cousins' contributions. Kids ran between tables playing tag while adults clustered in familiar groups, the same ones that formed at every family gathering. Marcus held court near the bar, Jennifer beside him but distant, her smile not reaching her eyes. Emma clung to her mother's leg, unusually quiet for a 7-year-old at a party. Amy arrived at 4:30, giving me a subtle nod. She'd positioned herself strategically, phone ready. My cousin Lisa was in on it too. She'd seen enough at family gatherings to believe me immediately when Amy reached out. They spread themselves around the room, human cameras ready to capture what was coming. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket, a text from David. "In position outside. Recording devices are live. Good luck." The speeches started at 5. Uncle Tom went first, telling embarrassing stories about Dad as a teenager. Mom cried through her tribute to 40 years of marriage. Marcus took the microphone next, and I had to grip the edge of my chair to keep from running. He spoke about family values, about the lessons Dad had taught us about loyalty and trust and protecting each other. "Family means standing by each other," he said, looking directly at me, "even when someone we love is struggling with difficulties." Several relatives glanced my way with sympathy. Poor Sarah, having her mental health issues mentioned at Dad's birthday. The party continued, Marcus getting bolder with each drink. By 6, he was loud, handsy with the female cousins, his mask slipping in small ways only I seemed to notice. Or maybe others noticed but did what families do. Ignored it, excused it. Boys will be boys. Marcus will be Marcus. Jennifer had retreated to a corner with Emma, her face tight with embarrassment and something else. Fear? Recognition? As the sun started setting through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the fellowship hall, Marcus cornered me by the garage entrance where I'd gone to get more ice. The parking lot was visible through the open door, but the corner was partially hidden from the main room. Perfect, I thought. He'd chosen the spot himself. "Must be hard," he said, stepping too close, whiskey heavy on his breath. "Watching everyone believe the truth about you." His hand found my waist, fingers pressing possessively. "You could have made this easy, Sarah. Could have just admitted what you wanted." What exactly did I want, Marcus? I kept my voice steady, clear, loud enough to carry. My phone was recording in my pocket, but I wanted more witnesses. He laughed, pulling me closer, his other hand moving to my lower back. "Don't play dumb now. We both know why you made those accusations. Jealous of Jennifer, wanting what she has, what we could have had if you hadn't been so stubborn. Marcus. Jennifer's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Jennifer stood in the doorway, backlit by the fellowship hall lights. But she wasn't alone. Amy flanked her left side, cousin Lisa on her right, and behind them, a growing crowd of relatives drawn by Jennifer's sharp voice. She held her phone up, the screen glowing, and I realized she'd been recording everything. 7 years, she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. 7 years of this, and I convinced myself I was imagining it. Marcus released me instantly, stepping back, his face cycling through expressions. Surprise, anger, that calculated look I'd learned to fear. Jen, honey, this isn't what it looks like. Sarah's been... Stop. Jennifer's voice could have cut glass. Just stop. I know about the poker games that don't exist. I know about the tracking app on my phone. And I know about this. She threw her phone at Marcus. It hit his chest and clattered to the floor, but not before everyone saw what was playing on the screen. Security footage from their nanny cam, Marcus in Emma's room at 2 a.m., installing something in the air vent. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. The crowd exploded. Dad pushed through, his face purple with rage. What the hell is that? What did you put in my granddaughter's room? Uncle Tom and 2 other men stepped forward, blocking Marcus's path to the door. Mom stood frozen, her hand over her mouth, the birthday cake server still gripped in her other hand like a weapon she'd forgotten she was holding. There's more, Amy announced, projecting her tablet onto the white wall where Dad's birthday slideshow had been playing, the screen filled with bank statements. He's been stealing from his clients' escrow accounts, small amounts, but consistent, enough to fund his hidden life. The numbers scrolled past, dozens of transactions, hundreds of thousands of dollars over 5 years. My friend at the FBI has been investigating for months. They were waiting for more evidence. But the twist that shattered the family completely came from Emma herself. She'd broken free from the children's area and ran to Jennifer, her small voice cutting through the chaos. Mommy, is Daddy in trouble for the cameras? Every parent in the room turned to stare. The one in my room makes a red light at night, like the ones he showed me in Aunt Sassy's apartment when we visited that time you were at the doctor. The silence was deafening. Every eye turned to me, then to Marcus, then back to me. The doubt I'd seen in my mother's eyes for months finally, completely transformed into horror, not at me, but at what she'd chosen to believe, who she'd chosen to protect. You took her to my apartment? My voice came out steady, but inside I was screaming. You brought Emma to install cameras in my home? Marcus's mask finally completely shattered, his face contorted with rage, and he lunged toward me. You ruined everything. This was supposed to be... David Chen materialized from nowhere, catching Marcus's arm and twisting it behind his back in one smooth motion. That's assault, he said calmly, adding to the stalking, voyeurism, theft, and fraud. 2 uniformed officers appeared in the doorway. David had called them as backup, just in case. Patricia, my lawyer, stepped forward with a thick folder. This is a cease and desist order, and these are copies of the evidence we'll be providing to the FBI. Mr. Mitchell has been under investigation for more than just family crimes. She pulled out a photograph, blown up large enough for everyone to see, Marcus entering a hotel room with a girl who looked barely 18. She was 17. Her parents hired us when she came forward 6 months ago. She wasn't the first. Jennifer collapsed into a chair, sobbing. How many? She asked, though I don't think she wanted to know the answer. 15 that we know of, Patricia replied. Hidden cameras in rental properties, clients' homes during showings, gym locker rooms. Your husband has been running a voyeurism ring, selling the footage online. The FBI traced the payments to an offshore account in his name. Mom walked over to Marcus, still restrained by David. For a moment, I thought she might defend him even now. Instead, she slapped him across the face with enough force to snap his head sideways. "Sarah told us," she said, her voice breaking. "She showed us evidence and we called her crazy. Our daughter needed us, and we chose you." She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." But I was watching Emma, sweet Emma, who stood holding Jennifer's hand, looking confused and scared. 7 years old and already a victim, already forced to speak truths that adults should have protected her from ever having to say. She'd done what I couldn't do at 23, made them believe. Not because her evidence was better, but because she was 7, and even Marcus's golden glow couldn't outshine the word of a child about cameras in her bedroom. The officers read Marcus his rights while 50 members of the Mitchell family watched in stunned silence. As they led him away, he turned back one last time, looking directly at me. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It is." Marcus was arrested that night on multiple charges: stalking, voyeurism, fraud, and possession of child exploitation material after they found the cameras in Emma's room. The FBI raided his office the next morning, seizing computers that contained terabytes of illegally recorded footage from dozens of women over 7 years. He took a plea deal to avoid trial. 15 years in federal prison with possibility of parole in 7, lifetime registration as a sex offender, and restitution to all identified victims. The day he was sentenced, he looked at me across the courtroom with the same calculating eyes, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. He had no power anymore. Jennifer filed for divorce the day after the reunion, getting an emergency restraining order that covered both her and Emma. She got everything in the divorce: the house, the cars, his business assets that weren't seized by the FBI, and most importantly, full custody with no visitation rights. She sold the house within a month, unable to live surrounded by walls that might have hidden cameras. She and Emma moved to Oregon to live with Amy, starting fresh where the Mitchell name meant nothing. Before she left, she came to my apartment with Emma. "I need to apologize," Jennifer said, Emma playing with blocks I'd bought months ago, before everything exploded. "When you tried to tell us, I should have believed you. I knew something was off. I'd felt it for years but kept making excuses. If I'd listened..." She started crying. "Emma didn't need to go through this. You didn't need to go through this alone." I hugged her then. This woman who'd been my sister-in-law, who'd become a stranger, who was now something else, a fellow survivor. "We protect her now," I said. "That's what matters." Emma looked up from her blocks. "Aunt Sassy, are you coming to Oregon with us?" "No, sweetheart, but you can write me letters. I'll write back every time." She smiled, gap-toothed and innocent despite everything. "Promise?" "Promise." Jennifer enrolled Emma in therapy immediately, finding a specialist in childhood trauma who helped her understand that secrets aren't always good, that her body belonged to her, that adults who loved her would never ask her to hide things from her mom. The therapist told Jennifer that Emma was resilient, that with support she'd be okay. But those words felt hollow when Jennifer called me crying because Emma had started checking her room for cameras every night before bed. My parents tried to reconcile, desperately. Dad wrote letters filled with apologies, each one more broken than the last. "We failed you as parents. We chose comfort over truth. I'll never forgive myself." Mom left voicemails that I couldn't finish listening to, her voice destroyed by guilt. "Please come home. Please let us try to make this right. We love you. We've always loved you. We just loved wrong." But home wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene where I'd been disbelieved, where my truth had been sacrificed for the comfort of maintaining the family image. I responded once, a single letter. "I forgive you because I need to heal. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You chose him when I needed you most. That choice can't be undone. I hope you find peace, but I won't be part of your journey to find it. Please respect my boundary and don't contact me again. I finished my MCAT 3 months after Marcus's arrest, scoring in the 95th percentile despite everything. My application essay to medical school was about resilience, about advocating for those whose voices aren't believed, about the intersection of medicine and justice. I got accepted to my top choice, a program 3 states away where nobody knew the Mitchell name, where I could be just Sarah, medical student, survivor, advocate. I graduated from medical school 4 years later, choosing emergency medicine with a specialization in treating assault survivors. My residency supervisor noticed my ability to connect with patients who'd been violated, to believe them immediately, to document everything meticulously. "You have a gift," she said. I didn't tell her it wasn't a gift, but a hard-won skill, paid for in tears and isolation and the loss of everything I'd thought family meant. Emma writes me letters, as promised. She's 14 now, thriving in Oregon, wants to be a lawyer, to help people like you helped us. She doesn't remember much about Marcus anymore, Jennifer says. Just vague shadows that sometimes make her check locks twice. That's a mercy. Perhaps the only one in this whole story. She sends me photos from her soccer games, her art projects, her first school dance. In every photo, she's smiling, really smiling, not the practiced smile of a child keeping secrets, but the genuine joy of a teenager who feels safe in her skin. I keep one photo on my desk in my resident office, Emma and me at the beach last summer, when I flew to Oregon for her middle school graduation. We're both laughing at something off camera, our hair whipped by the coastal wind, looking nothing like aunt and niece and everything like survivors who chose to build something beautiful from the ashes of what burned. 7 years later, when Mom called at 2 a.m., I was in my resident call room, 36 hours into a shift, running on hospital coffee and determination. I'd just lost a patient, a young woman who'd come in too late, too afraid to tell anyone what her boyfriend had done until her injuries were beyond repair. I was sitting in the dark, wondering if I'd ever stop seeing Marcus's victims in every bruised face, every fearful glance, every "I fell down the stairs" lie, when my phone lit up with a number I'd blocked, but somehow still recognized. I almost didn't answer. But something, instinct, closure, maybe just exhaustion, made me swipe accept. Mom's voice came through broken, aged a decade in the 7 years since I'd heard it. "Sarah? God, Sarah, please don't hang up. It's about Marcus. Emma." Emma reported him to her school counselor. During a supervised prison visit, she said he tried to... She used words a 14-year-old shouldn't know. "You were telling the truth. All of it. We destroyed our family. We lost you. Please, please forgive us." I sat in that dark call room, listening to my mother sob, and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a deep, bone-tired sadness for the girl I'd been at 23, begging to be believed. "You were telling the truth?" she kept saying, as if repetition could undo the years of damage. "No," I said quietly, my voice steady as it always was now when delivering hard truths. "I would never tell the truth, remember? That's what you said. Marcus would never. But I would. I was the liar, the sick one, the daughter who needed help." The silence stretched between us, filled with 7 years of birthdays I hadn't attended, Christmases I'd spent alone, a father's funeral I'd learned about from Amy after the fact. Dad had died 2 years ago, heart attack, though Amy said it was really shame that killed him. He'd never stopped writing letters I never opened. "Please," Mom whispered, "we're still your parents." "No," I replied, surprising myself with how gentle my voice sounded. Parents protect their children, all of them. You protected one and sacrificed the other. Emma needed what I never got, someone to believe her the first time. Thank Jennifer for that. Thank Amy. Thank the therapist who taught her that her voice mattered. But don't thank yourself. You would have done to Emma what you did to me if she hadn't had better advocates. How do I live with this? She asked, and for a moment she sounded like the mother who'd taught me to tie my shoes, who'd held my hair back when I was sick, who'd cried at my high school graduation. The same way I did, I told her. One day at a time, with therapy. With the understanding that some things can't be undone, only learned from. You want my forgiveness? Take your guilt and turn it into something useful. Volunteer at a crisis center. Donate to survivor organizations. When you hear someone dismiss an accusation because they would never, remember that you said those exact words about Marcus. Remember what those words cost. Make sure they never cost another family what they cost ours. I hung up. Then, gently, without anger. My pager buzzed. Another patient coming in. Another chance to be the advocate someone needed. I stood up, splashed cold water on my face, and went back to work. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, trust, or love. It just guarantees shared DNA, and sometimes that's the most meaningless connection of all. The people who should protect you might choose their own comfort over your safety, their favorite child's lies over your desperate truth. They might sacrifice you on the altar of family image, then call it love while you bleed. But here's what I learned in those dark months when everyone I loved called me crazy. You can be your own family. You can mother yourself through trauma, father yourself through fear, sister yourself through solidarity with other survivors. You can build a chosen family of people who believe you the first time, who don't need 15 years of evidence to know you're telling the truth, who understand that "they would never" are the three most dangerous words in the English language. To anyone watching who's been called a liar when you finally found the courage to speak up, document everything. Save every text, every email, every voicemail. Install cameras, hire professionals. Build your case like your life depends on it, because it might. Trust your instincts when they scream danger. Even if that danger wears your brother's face, your father's smile, your mother's DNA. Your body knows threats that your heart wants to deny. And know this: staying silent to keep the peace isn't peace, it's prison. Speaking up and losing everyone is better than staying quiet and losing yourself. You don't owe forgiveness to people who wouldn't offer you belief. You don't owe reconciliation to those who chose comfort over your safety. You don't owe anything to anyone who heard you cry for help and responded by calling you crazy. You owe yourself truth, safety, a life where you can sleep without checking for cameras, where you can trust that family means protection, not predation. That life might be smaller than the one you imagined, might have fewer people around the table at holidays, might require you to create new traditions with chosen family who earned their seats through belief rather than blood. But it will be yours, built on truth rather than lies, trust rather than terror. Some stories don't have happy endings, just honest ones. This is mine. I survived. I got out. I built something better from the ashes. And when my mother called 7 years later to say she finally believed me, I realized I no longer needed her belief. I had my own. What would you do if you were in her place? Tell us in the comments.